In 334 BCE, a young Macedonian king stood at the threshold of history. Alexander, barely 20 years old, gazed across the Hellespont at the vast Persian Empire. His 40,000 strong army awaited his command. From childhood, Alexander had been groomed for greatness. Now he faced his ultimate test: to conquer the mightiest empire the world had ever known. How would this audacious youth overcome the Persian war machine that had crushed so many before him? What revolutionary tactics would he employ to reshape warfare and create one of the largest empires in history? The Macedonian prince, Alexander's early years. In the tumultuous landscape of ancient Greece, a young prince emerged who would reshape the known world. Born in 356 BCE to King Philip II and Queen Olympias of Macedon, Alexander entered a realm fraught with political intrigue and military ambition. Macedon, though often considered a backwater by its more sophisticated Greek neighbours, was rapidly ascending as a formidable power under Philip's rule. Alexander's early years were marked by a rigorous education befitting a future king. At the age of 13, his father appointed the renowned philosopher Aristotle as his tutor. For 3 years, Alexander immersed himself in a diverse curriculum, encompassing philosophy, rhetoric, literature, and natural sciences. Aristotle's teachings profoundly influenced Alexander's worldview, instilling in him a deep curiosity about the natural world and a respect for diverse cultures. These lessons would later shape Alexander's approach to leadership and his treatment of conquered peoples. Under Aristotle's tutelage, Alexander developed a deep appreciation for Greek culture and literature. He became particularly enamored with Homer's Iliad, often sleeping with a copy under his pillow. The epic's tales of heroic deeds and conquest resonated deeply with the young prince, fueling his own aspirations for greatness. While his intellectual pursuits were significant, Alexander's military training began at an early age. Philip II, recognizing the importance of martial prowess, ensured that his son received instruction in the art of war from seasoned Macedonian generals. This blend of intellectual and military education would prove crucial in Alexander's future campaigns. The relationship between Alexander and his father was complex and often strained. While Philip recognized his son's talents, he also viewed him as a potential rival. Tensions came to a head in 337 BCE when Philip married Cleopatra Eurydice, a Macedonian noblewoman. During the wedding feast, Alexander publicly quarreled with his father and subsequently fled Macedon with his mother. At the age of 16, Alexander's leadership abilities were put to the test when Philip left him as regent while away on campaign. During this time, Alexander suppressed a rebellion of the Thracian Maedi, demonstrating both his tactical acumen and his ruthlessness. He ordered the rebels' city to be razed and renamed it after himself, an early indication of his penchant for self-aggrandizement. Alexander's most significant early military experience came at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE. At just 18 years old, he commanded the left wing of the Macedonian army, playing a crucial role in the decisive victory over the combined forces of Athens and Thebes. This battle not only showcased Alexander's military prowess, but also marked the effective end of Greek city-state independence, solidifying Macedon's hegemony over Greece. The political landscape of Macedon was irrevocably altered in 336 BCE, when Philip II was assassinated by one of his bodyguards. The circumstances surrounding Philip's death remain shrouded in mystery, with some ancient sources hinting at possible involvement by Alexander or his mother, Olympias. Regardless of the truth, Alexander wasted no time in securing his claim to the throne. In the wake of Philip's assassination, Alexander moved swiftly and decisively to eliminate potential rivals and consolidate his power. He ordered the execution of several of his cousins who could have challenged his rule, as well as his father's infant son by Cleopatra Eurydice. These actions, while brutal, effectively removed any immediate threats to his succession. With his position in Macedon secured, Alexander turned his attention to reasserting control over the Greek city-states that had been subjugated by his father. Many saw Philip's death as an opportunity to regain their independence, and rebellions began to foment throughout Greece. Alexander's response was swift and forceful, demonstrating both his military prowess and his political acumen. By the time he reached the age of 20, Alexander had accomplished what many rulers fail to achieve in a lifetime. He had secured his position as king, quelled internal dissent, reasserted control over Greece, and expanded his kingdom's borders. The stage was now set for Alexander to embark on the grand conquest that would immortalize his name in history. The Persian Empire, a formidable foe. As Alexander turned his gaze eastward, he faced a foe that had dominated the ancient world for centuries. The Persian Empire, stretching from the shores of Egypt to the mountains of India, stood as a colossus of power and wealth. This vast realm, ruled by King Darius III, presented a formidable challenge to the young Macedonian king's ambitions. The sheer scale of the Persian Empire was staggering. Its territories encompassed diverse landscapes, from fertile river valleys to arid deserts, and included some of the most prosperous cities of the ancient world. This geographical expanse translated into an immense pool of resources and manpower that Darius could draw upon to defend his realm. At the heart of Persian military might stood the legendary Immortals, an elite force of 10,000 warriors, renowned for their effectiveness in battle. These soldiers formed the backbone of Darius's personal guard and were a key component of the Persian army. The Immortals, along with other specialized units, gave the Persian forces a formidable mix of skill and numbers that had overwhelmed previous invaders. The Persian military structure was not limited to infantry alone. Their forces boasted a significant cavalry component, with an estimated 10,000 horsemen drawn from various regions of the empire. Medes, Hyrcanians, and Bactrians contributed skilled riders to the Persian ranks, creating a mobile and versatile fighting force that could adapt to various terrains and battle conditions. The size of the Persian army was truly awe-inspiring. At the Battle of Issus, one of the pivotal confrontations between Alexander and Darius, historical estimates suggest that the Persian force numbered up to 100,000 strong. This massive army included some of the finest soldiers from across the empire, with Darius's own household troops forming an elite corps of 10,000 warriors. Beyond land-based forces, the Persian Empire also commanded a powerful navy, with major bases strategically positioned around the eastern Mediterranean. The Persian fleet posed a significant threat to any invading army's supply lines. This naval supremacy had long been a key factor in maintaining Persian dominance over the region, and presented a unique challenge to Alexander's primarily land-based military strategy. The strength of the Persian Empire was not solely rooted in its military capabilities. The empire's administrative efficiency was a marvel of the ancient world. A sophisticated system of governance allowed Darius to mobilize vast resources quickly, coordinating efforts across his sprawling territories. This administrative prowess meant that the Persians could sustain prolonged military campaigns and rapidly respond to threats, making them a daunting adversary for any would-be conqueror. The Persian Empire's reputation for invincibility was well earned. Previous attempts by Greek city-states to challenge Persian power had ended in failure, further highlighting the formidable nature of the Persian military and administrative systems. These historical precedents cast a long shadow over Alexander's invasion plans, serving as a stark reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Persian response to Alexander's initial incursion was surprisingly dismissive. Persian commanders, accustomed to their empire's supremacy, initially regarded Alexander's invasion as a minor threat. This underestimation of the young Macedonian king's military capabilities and the resolve of his forces would prove to be a critical error in the early stages of the conflict. However, beneath its imposing exterior, the Persian Empire harbored vulnerabilities that a cunning opponent could exploit. The empire's vast size, while providing immense resources, also presented challenges in coordinating its diverse forces effectively. The reliance on traditional tactics and the lack of unity among its varied ethnic and cultural groups were potential weaknesses that an innovative military mind might turn to advantage. As Alexander prepared to confront this ancient superpower, the stage was set for a clash that would reshape the political landscape of the known world. The young Macedonian king, armed with innovative military tactics and a core of battle-hardened veterans, stood ready to challenge the might of Persia. The question that hung in the air was whether Alexander's military genius and the loyalty of his troops would be enough to overcome the seemingly insurmountable advantages of the Persian Empire. Crossing the Rubicon, the invasion begins. In 334 BC, Alexander the Great stood at the precipice of history, preparing to lead his army across the Hellespont into Asia Minor. The narrow strait, separating Europe from Asia, posed a formidable challenge for the young Macedonian king's ambitious invasion. As dawn broke, Alexander's forces began their crossing, a logistical feat of immense proportions. Thousands of men, horses, and supplies were ferried across the choppy waters, marking the beginning of a campaign that would reshape the ancient world. The Macedonian army, 40,000 strong, was a diverse and formidable fighting force. At its core were 9,000 Macedonian phalangites, wielding the fearsome 18-foot sarissa spear. Supporting them were 3,000 elite hypaspists, 5,000 mercenary hoplites, and 7,000 Greek allies. The cavalry, a crucial element of Alexander's tactical innovations, completed this professional and versatile military machine. Upon reaching Asian soil, Alexander made a calculated gesture that resonated deeply with his Greek heritage and ambitions. He visited the tomb of Achilles, the legendary hero of the Trojan War. This act was not mere sentimentality. It was a deliberate move to position himself as the heir to Greek heroism and cultural superiority. By paying homage to Achilles, Alexander tapped into a wellspring of mythological power, invoking the spirit of past glories to inspire his men and intimidate his enemies. The first major test of Alexander's invasion force came at the river Granicus, where they encountered a Persian army of approximately 10,000 cavalry and several thousand Greek mercenaries. The Persian commanders, underestimating the threat posed by the young Macedonian king, formed their front line with a wall of cavalry. This tactical decision would prove disastrous in the face of Alexander's innovative approach to warfare. At Granicus, Alexander unveiled his revolutionary combined arms tactics. He positioned his phalanx at the center, with light infantry and archers on the flanks. As the battle commenced, Alexander led a cavalry charge across the river, striking at the Persian left flank. Simultaneously, he ordered his phalanx to advance, creating a diversion that drew the Persian cavalry into a frontal assault. This coordinated attack overwhelmed the Persian lines, demonstrating the lethal efficiency of Alexander's integrated forces. The victory at Granicus was a resounding success, dealing a psychological blow to Persian prestige and boosting Macedonian morale. It proved that Alexander's forces could defeat the Persians in open battle, setting the stage for further advances into enemy territory. As Alexander pushed deeper into Asia Minor, he encountered the legendary Gordian knot in the city of Gordium. According to prophecy, whoever could untie this intricate knot would rule all of Asia. Alexander, in a characteristic display of boldness, reportedly solved the problem by simply cutting through the knot with his sword. This act, whether historical or apocryphal, encapsulated Alexander's approach to obstacles: direct, decisive, and unbound by conventional thinking. The strategic importance of controlling the coastal regions of Asia Minor was paramount to Alexander's campaign. He recognized that to secure his invasion and maintain his supply lines, he needed to neutralize Persian naval power. By systematically capturing key coastal cities and ports, Alexander effectively dismantled the Persian naval advantage, ensuring the security of his expanding empire's maritime flank. As news of Alexander's successes spread, many local governors and Persian satraps in Asia Minor began to reassess their loyalties. Some chose to resist, while others surrendered or defected to the Macedonian side. This fragmentation of Persian authority further facilitated Alexander's advance, allowing him to consolidate his gains and prepare for the inevitable confrontation with the main Persian army. The Battle of Issus, a clash of kings. The coastal plain near Issus stretched before the armies. A narrow strip of land barely 6 miles wide, hemmed in by mountains on one side and the sea on the other. This confined battlefield would become the stage for a pivotal clash between Alexander the Great and Darius III of Persia in 333 BCE. Darius, having outmaneuvered the Macedonians, positioned his forces to block Alexander's escape route, cutting off supply lines and seemingly trapping the young king. The Persian army, numbering nearly 100,000 troops, dwarfed Alexander's force of approximately 40,000 men. Darius's formation included the elite Immortals and his best cavalry on the right flank, with Greek mercenaries forming the center. Despite the overwhelming odds, Alexander recognized an opportunity in the confined space, which would limit Darius's ability to fully deploy his larger force. As the armies faced each other, tension mounted. Alexander, aware of the gravity of the situation, addressed his troops personally. He moved along the front lines, making eye contact with individual soldiers, reminding them of their past victories and the glory that awaited them. His words ignited a fire in the hearts of his men, preparing them for the brutal clash ahead. The battle commenced with Alexander leading a charge at the head of his right wing, which included the formidable companion cavalry and elite javelin throwers. This aggressive maneuver aimed to strike at the heart of the Persian formation. Alexander, his blonde hair visible beneath his plumed helmet, was at the forefront of the assault, his sword raised high as he urged his men forward. As Alexander's charge penetrated the Persian lines, the battlefield erupted into fierce combat. The Macedonian phalanx, initially struggling in the center, faced intense pressure from the Persian forces. However, the disruption caused by Alexander's charge allowed the phalanx to regain momentum. The synchronized movement of the phalanx, with their long sarissas forming an impenetrable wall of spears, gradually pushed back the Persian center. The battle reached its climax as Alexander and his companions drove deeper into the Persian ranks, aiming directly for Darius III. Alexander, his armor splattered with blood and dust, fought with a ferocity that inspired his men to greater efforts. As the Macedonian cavalry approached, Darius, witnessing the collapse of his front lines, was overcome with fear. In a moment that would forever change the course of the battle, the Persian king turned his chariot and fled the battlefield. The sight of Darius in flight had a devastating effect on Persian morale. Soldiers who moments before had fought with determination now looked to each other in confusion and panic. The cohesion of the Persian army rapidly disintegrated as the realization of their king's abandonment spread through the ranks. Conversely, the Macedonians were galvanized by the enemy's disarray. Alexander's troops, already buoyed by their leader's bravery, now pressed their advantage with renewed vigor. As the Persian lines crumbled, the battle transformed into a rout. The Macedonian forces pursued their fleeing opponents with ruthless efficiency. The scale of the Persian defeat was staggering. Ptolemy, one of Alexander's trusted commanders, later recounted that there were so many Persian dead that his men used their bodies to fill a ravine, allowing them to cross and continue their pursuit. The Battle of Issus stands as a testament to Alexander's tactical brilliance and personal courage. By turning a potentially disastrous situation into a decisive victory, he demonstrated his ability to adapt to unexpected challenges and exploit his enemy's weaknesses. The young king's willingness to lead from the front, risking his own life in the thick of battle, had inspired his troops to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. Siege of Tyre, Alexander's greatest challenge. Alexander's siege of Tyre in 332 BCE presented an unprecedented challenge to his military prowess. The Phoenician stronghold, situated on an island half a mile from the mainland, had repelled countless invaders throughout history. Its formidable defenses and naval superiority emboldened the Tyrians to reject Alexander's demands for surrender, setting the stage for a grueling 7-month siege that would test the limits of Macedonian resolve. The most immediate obstacle was the stretch of water separating Tyre from the coast. Undeterred, Alexander ordered the construction of a massive causeway to bridge this gap. This engineering marvel required an immense volume of materials, with workers stripping stone and timber from the ruins of old Tyre on the mainland. As the causeway inched forward, laborers toiled under a constant barrage of Tyrian arrows, rocks, and flaming projectiles. The deeper waters near the island proved treacherous, with powerful currents eroding the structure faster than it could be built. Tyrian counterattacks were relentless and ingenious. They deployed fire ships, vessels laden with combustible materials, to wreak havoc on the Macedonian fleet. These attacks not only destroyed much of Alexander's work, but also inflicted heavy casualties on his forces. Recognizing the need to neutralize Tyre's naval advantage, Alexander assembled his own fleet, recruiting ships from conquered cities and persuading some Phoenician vessels to defect. This naval buildup allowed him to establish a blockade, cutting off Tyre's supply lines and limiting their ability to launch attacks. Even with naval support, breaching Tyre's walls remained a formidable task. Alexander employed cutting-edge siege technology, including massive towers mounted on ships. These floating fortresses allowed his forces to attack the city walls from a distance, providing an unprecedented tactical advantage in naval warfare. As the siege dragged on, the psychological toll on both sides intensified. Alexander's troops, accustomed to swift victories, grew increasingly restless and demoralized. The constant danger and grueling labor tested their resolve. Within Tyre, the initial confidence of the defenders gave way to growing anxiety. As Alexander's forces inexorably advanced, food supplies dwindled, and the prolonged isolation began to wear on the population's morale. Alexander, keenly aware of the importance of maintaining his army's fighting spirit, led from the front. He personally participated in assaults on the city walls, inspiring his men with his courage and determination. This hands-on leadership helped sustain the Macedonian army's motivation through the long months of the siege. The final assault came after 7 months of relentless effort. Using their ship-borne siege towers, Alexander's forces breached the southern wall of the city. The Macedonian army poured through this opening, engaging in fierce street-to-street combat with the desperate Tyrian defenders. The battle was brutal and bloody, with both sides knowing that the fate of the city hung in the balance. In the end, Alexander's persistence and ingenuity overcame Tyre's defenses. The city fell, marking a significant victory in his campaign against Persia. However, the triumph came at a terrible cost. The consequences of the siege were devastating for Tyre's inhabitants, with most of the city's citizens killed or enslaved. A harsh reminder of the brutal realities of ancient warfare and the price of resistance against Alexander's ambitions. Egypt, from conqueror to pharaoh. As Alexander's forces approached Egypt's borders in 332 BCE, the land of the pharaohs stood at a crossroads. Years of Persian rule had created simmering discontent among the populace, who longed for a return to their ancient customs and religious practices. Alexander, sensing this undercurrent of dissatisfaction, made a calculated decision to present himself not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. Upon entering Egypt, Alexander was met with an unexpected reception. Instead of resistance, he found a populace eager to embrace him as a savior from Persian oppression. This warm welcome was further solidified when the priests of Memphis, in a ceremony steeped in millennia of tradition, crowned Alexander as pharaoh. This act of coronation transformed Alexander's status from foreign invader to divinely sanctioned ruler in the eyes of the Egyptian people. Building on this initial success, Alexander embarked on a perilous journey across the desert to the Oracle of Siwa. This ancient sanctuary, dedicated to the god Amun, had long been a source of divine guidance for rulers and conquerors. The oracle's pronouncements were considered infallible, and its influence extended far beyond Egypt's borders. Upon reaching the oracle, Alexander received a proclamation that would fundamentally alter his status. He was declared the son of Amun, elevating him from mortal ruler to living god within the Egyptian pantheon. The cultural fusion, initiated by Alexander's conquest of Egypt, had profound and lasting consequences. The founding of Alexandria at the mouth of the Nile stands as a testament to this blending of Greek and Egyptian cultures. Envisioned as a beacon of Hellenistic civilization, Alexandria quickly grew into a cosmopolitan center of learning and commerce. The city's famous library and lighthouse became wonders of the ancient world, attracting scholars, artists, and merchants from across the known world. Alexander's administrative reforms in Egypt demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of governance and cultural integration. Rather than imposing a purely Greek system, he blended Greek and Egyptian administrative structures, creating a hybrid approach that would influence the region for centuries. By retaining many Egyptian officials in their positions and respecting local customs, Alexander ensured a smooth transition of power and minimized potential resistance to his rule. The contrast between Alexander's treatment of Egypt and the previous Persian occupation was stark. Where the Persians had often been heavy-handed and culturally insensitive, Alexander presented himself as a protector of Egyptian traditions. He participated in Egyptian religious ceremonies, made offerings to the gods, and even adopted elements of Egyptian royal dress. This cultural flexibility not only won him the support of the Egyptian elite, but also resonated deeply with the broader population. The strategic importance of Egypt to Alexander's empire cannot be overstated. Its vast agricultural wealth, control of key trade routes, and cultural prestige made it an invaluable asset. By winning the hearts and minds of the Egyptian people, Alexander had secured his western flank and gained a stable base from which to launch further campaigns. The legacy of Alexander's conquest of Egypt would endure long after his death. shaping the cultural and political landscape of the Mediterranean world for centuries to come. Gaugamela, the decisive battle. As the sun rose over the plains of Gaugamela in 331 BCE, two formidable armies stood poised for battle. The Persian force, a vast sea of men and beasts stretching to the horizon, dwarfed the Macedonian army before it. Tension hung thick in the air as soldiers on both sides gripped their weapons, knowing that the fate of empires would be decided that day. Darius III had assembled a force of 50,000 to 80,000 men, drawing from the far reaches of his empire. The Persian army boasted infantry from Syria and Babylonia, cavalry from Armenia, India, and Central Asia, and up to 200 fearsome scythed chariots. In contrast, Alexander's smaller but battle-hardened army, possibly outnumbered 2-1, stood in disciplined formation, the Macedonian phalanx at its core. As the armies faced each other, Alexander unveiled his unconventional battle plan. He led his right wing in an unexpected maneuver, moving further to the right and prompting Darius to weaken his center in an attempt to outflank the Macedonians. This tactical genius created the opening Alexander had anticipated. Darius, seeing the Macedonian movement, unleashed his scythed chariots. However, Alexander had prepared for this. His Agriones javelin throwers targeted the horses and crews with deadly accuracy, neutralizing the chariot threat before it could reach the Macedonian lines. This countermeasure allowed Alexander's infantry to maintain their formation, rendering one of Darius's most potent weapons ineffective. With the Persian center weakened and the chariot attack thwarted, Alexander seized the moment. He led his elite companion cavalry in a decisive charge, driving a wedge into the heart of the Persian army. The suddenness and ferocity of this assault sowed panic among the Persian troops, ultimately causing Darius to flee the battlefield. However, victory was not yet assured. While Alexander's right flank succeeded, his left flank under Parmenion faced severe pressure from Persian cavalry. The situation became so dire that Parmenion sent a desperate plea for help to Alexander, forcing the young king to make a critical decision. Abandoning his pursuit of Darius, Alexander regrouped and charged the Persian right wing. This phase of the battle proved to be the most intense and bloody, with the companion cavalry suffering significant casualties in close-quarters combat. Alexander's presence on the front lines, sharing in the dangers faced by his men, inspired the Macedonian forces to push beyond their limits. As the Persian center collapsed and their right wing crumbled under renewed Macedonian assault, the once mighty Persian army disintegrated into a chaotic mass of fleeing soldiers. Alexander's victory at Gaugamela was decisive, with ancient sources claiming Macedonian losses of only a few hundred compared to thousands of Persian casualties. The Battle of Gaugamela marked a significant shift in the balance of power in the ancient world. Alexander's military genius and innovative tactics had dismantled the previously dominant Persian forces, effectively ending the Persian Empire as a cohesive entity. This victory not only secured Alexander's reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders, but also paved the way for the spread of Hellenistic culture across vast swathes of Asia. In the days following the battle, Alexander moved swiftly to capitalize on his success. He pursued Darius deeper into Persian territory, intent on capturing the fleeing king and solidifying his claim to the Persian throne. The great cities of the empire, including Babylon and Susa, fell to Alexander in quick succession, their treasuries swelling his coffers and fueling his ambitions for further conquest. The fall of Persepolis, triumph and controversy. As Alexander approached Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire, he stood at a crucial crossroads. The city, a marvel of ancient architecture, sprawled before him with its towering columns, intricate reliefs, and gleaming golden roofs. Persepolis held immense symbolic importance as the heart of Persian culture and power, representing centuries of imperial might and artistic achievement. Alexander's actions in this awe-inspiring city would not only shape the future of his campaign, but also define his legacy as either a conqueror or a legitimate ruler of the Persian realm. Initially, Alexander attempted to present himself as a rightful successor to King Darius, showing restraint in his treatment of Persian customs and institutions. This approach aligned with his earlier efforts to integrate local governance structures and respect cultural traditions in conquered territories. However, the young Macedonian king faced a complex dilemma: how to balance his role as a victorious general with his aspirations to rule a vast, multicultural empire. The treasures found within Persepolis were beyond imagination, surpassing even the wildest expectations of Alexander and his battle-hardened troops. The city's vast wealth, accumulated over generations of Persian rule, significantly impacted the morale and resources of the Macedonian army. Soldiers who had endured years of grueling campaigns suddenly found themselves surrounded by unparalleled riches, potentially reinvigorating their commitment to Alexander's cause. Despite the initial restraint, Alexander's relationship with Persepolis took a dramatic and controversial turn. In a decision that would spark centuries of debate, he ordered the pillaging and burning of the city. This act of destruction was ostensibly framed as retribution for the Persian invasion of Greece and the burning of Athens' sacred temples in 480 BCE, events that had occurred over 150 years earlier. The burning of Persepolis held profound symbolic significance. It marked the end of the Achaemenid dynasty's power and the ascendancy of Macedonian rule. The destruction of the royal palaces, with their intricate friezes depicting the might of Persian kings, was a powerful statement of Alexander's conquest. However, this act of cultural erasure would have far-reaching consequences for Alexander's empire-building ambitions. The reaction of the Persians to the destruction of their sacred city was one of profound loss and resentment. Persepolis was not merely a seat of government. It was a symbol of their cultural heritage, a testament to the artistic and architectural achievements of their civilization. Its destruction represented not only a military defeat, but also a spiritual and cultural blow to the Persian people. The burning of Persepolis had far-reaching consequences for Alexander's campaign and his vision of empire. It marked a turning point in his relationship with his Persian subjects, many of whom had initially welcomed him as a liberator from the oppressive rule of Darius III. The destruction of this cultural landmark complicated his efforts to integrate them into his new power structure, eroding much of the goodwill Alexander had cultivated among the Persian elite. Moreover, the controversy surrounding Persepolis raised questions about Alexander's long-term goals and his ability to govern a diverse empire. While his military prowess was unquestionable, his actions at Persepolis suggested a potential lack of political finesse or cultural sensitivity. This event foreshadowed the challenges Alexander would face as he pushed further east, attempting to meld disparate cultures and traditions into a cohesive imperial structure. The memory of Persepolis's destruction would linger, influencing Persian attitudes towards Macedonian rule long after Alexander's death, and shaping the complex legacy of his conquests in the region. Into the unknown, the Indian campaign. Alexander's decision to invade India in 327 BCE showcased an ambition that seemed boundless. Despite having already conquered the vast Persian Empire, the young Macedonian king set his sights on the mysterious lands to the east. This new campaign would test not only his military prowess, but also the very limits of human endurance and loyalty. The Indian subcontinent presented unprecedented challenges for Alexander and his army. They were venturing into territories largely unknown to the Greeks, facing a landscape vastly different from anything they had encountered before. Dense jungles teeming with unfamiliar wildlife gave way to scorching deserts and treacherous mountain passes. Monsoon rains transformed placid rivers into raging torrents, while the oppressive heat and humidity sapped the strength of even the most hardened soldiers. As Alexander's forces pushed deeper into India, they encountered fierce resistance from local rulers. The most formidable of these was King Porus, who commanded a substantial army that included war elephants, a weapon the Macedonians had never faced before. The ensuing Battle of the Hydaspes River in 326 BCE proved to be one of Alexander's costliest engagements. The sight of Porus's war elephants struck terror into the Macedonian ranks, posing a significant threat to Alexander's cavalry-based tactics. Through a combination of adaptability and determination, Alexander managed to outmaneuver Porus and secure a victory. Following the battle, Alexander chose to reinstate Porus as a subordinate ruler, reflecting his evolving strategy of incorporating local leaders into his administration. By respecting Porus's leadership and utilizing his knowledge of the region, Alexander aimed to stabilize his control over the newly acquired Punjab region. The hardships of the Indian campaign intensified as Alexander pushed his army further east. The march through the Gedrosian desert took a devastating toll on the Macedonian forces. Soldiers suffered from extreme heat, lack of water, and food shortages. Many perished in the harsh conditions, their bodies left behind in the unforgiving landscape. The relentless pace of conquest and the unfamiliar environment began to wear on the morale of Alexander's troops. Men who had followed their king across thousands of miles, from the shores of the Mediterranean to the banks of the Indus, were reaching their breaking point. The discontent that had been simmering among the ranks finally boiled over at the river Hyphasis. Here, Alexander's men staged an unprecedented mutiny. These battle-hardened veterans, who had faced down the might of the Persian Empire without flinching, now refused to march any further into the unknown. They had reached their limit, both physically and psychologically. The prospect of pushing even deeper into India, facing more unknown dangers and hostile kingdoms, was simply too much to bear. Alexander's reaction to this mutiny was one of fury and disbelief. The man who had never known defeat now faced an insurmountable obstacle, the will of his own army. He raged and cajoled, attempting to stir the fighting spirit of his men. For 3 days, he remained in his tent, hoping that his soldiers would change their minds. But the resolve of the troops remained unshaken. Finally, Alexander was forced to confront a harsh reality. Even the greatest conqueror in history could not overcome the collective will of his army. With great reluctance, he gave the order to turn back. This moment marked not just the end of the Indian campaign, but also the furthest extent of Alexander's conquests. The dream of a truly global empire, stretching from the Mediterranean to the Bay of Bengal, had to be abandoned. The return journey proved to be as challenging as the advance. The march through the Gedrosian desert, in particular, was a harrowing experience. Many soldiers succumbed to the extreme conditions, dying of thirst, hunger, or exhaustion. The once mighty army that had swept across Asia was reduced to a shadow of its former self by the time it emerged from the desert. The transformation of Alexander. As Alexander's army emerged from the Gedrosian desert, battered and diminished, a more profound transformation was taking place within their leader. The crucible of constant warfare and the weight of ruling a vast empire had begun to reshape the once idealistic young king. This metamorphosis would challenge everything his Macedonian companions thought they knew about their sovereign and alter the very nature of his empire. Alexander's adoption of Persian customs and dress marked a significant departure from his Hellenic roots. He began wearing the Persian royal tunic and incorporating Persian-style clothing into his daily attire. These changes, viewed as effeminate and decadent by his Greek and Macedonian followers, sparked considerable discontent. The introduction of proskynesis, a Persian practice of prostration before the king, proved particularly controversial. This ritual, in which subjects would bow or prostrate themselves before the monarch, was anathema to Macedonian sensibilities. They believed such deference was reserved only for the gods, not mortal rulers, regardless of their accomplishments. The shift in Alexander's demeanor and practices coincided with a growing sense of paranoia. This heightened suspicion led to tragic consequences, as evidenced by the execution of some of his closest companions. One such incident involved Philotas, son of the venerable general Parmenion. Accused of plotting against Alexander, Philotas was subjected to torture before his eventual execution, in a calculated move to prevent any potential retaliation. Alexander also ordered the killing of Parmenion, a man who had served both him and his father with unwavering loyalty. Perhaps the most shocking demonstration of Alexander's transformation occurred during a drunken quarrel with Clytus the Black, one of his most trusted generals. Clytus, who had saved Alexander's life at the Battle of the Granicus, fell victim to the king's volatile temper. In a moment of rage, Alexander struck down the man who had once been his protector. This act of violence left the king deeply remorseful, highlighting the growing chasm between the ideals of his youth and the realities of his present. As Alexander adapted to ruling a vast and diverse empire, his military tactics and administrative strategies evolved. He began integrating Persians into the highest levels of his administration and military, a move that further stoked resentment among his Macedonian troops. This policy of integration, while pragmatic for governing such an expansive territory, represented a significant departure from the Hellenic-centric worldview that had initially driven his campaign. The discontent among Alexander's Macedonian forces reached a boiling point at Opis. Here, the troops mutinied, expressing their frustration over Alexander's apparent preference for Persian advisors and customs. The king's response was swift and severe. He executed the ringleaders to reassert his authority. This harsh action, while effective in quelling the immediate unrest, further widened the rift between Alexander and his original followers. In an attempt to bridge the cultural divide within his empire, Alexander orchestrated a mass marriage of Macedonian officers to Persian noblewomen. This grand gesture, while symbolically powerful, did little to assuage the concerns of his Macedonian companions. Instead, it served as yet another reminder of how far their king had strayed from his Hellenic roots. As Alexander's empire expanded, so too did the complexities of governing it. The young conqueror, who had set out from Macedonia with dreams of Hellenic glory, now found himself grappling with the realities of ruling a multicultural empire. His attempts to blend Macedonian and Persian cultures, while visionary in scope, ultimately alienated many of his original followers. The transformation was complete. Alexander had evolved from a Macedonian king to the Lord of Asia, a title that reflected both the vastness of his conquests and the profound changes in his character and rule, the vision of a world empire. As Alexander's army returned triumphantly to Babylon in 323 BCE, the city buzzed with anticipation. The young conqueror, now master of an empire stretching from Greece to India, rode through the streets surrounded by cheering crowds and exotic spoils. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the sounds of countless languages, a testament to the diversity of the lands Alexander now ruled. Standing atop the ziggurat of Atemenanki, Alexander surveyed his vast dominion, encompassing a multitude of cultures, languages, and traditions. The challenge before him was immense: to transform his conquests into a unified and enduring empire. This task required innovative approaches to governance, given the sheer geographical expanse and cultural diversity of his territories. Central to Alexander's unification strategy was his policy of racial fusion, exemplified by the mass wedding ceremony at Susa. Here, Alexander himself took two Persian princesses as wives, while arranging marriages between his Macedonian officers and Persian noblewomen. This grand gesture aimed to create lasting bonds between conquerors and conquered, laying the groundwork for a truly integrated empire. Even as Alexander grappled with the complexities of governing his vast territories, his mind turned to further expansion. He set plans in motion for potential campaigns into Arabia, North Africa, and the Western Mediterranean. These proposed expeditions reflected Alexander's undiminished appetite for conquest and his vision of an empire that would encompass the entire known world. To facilitate the spread of Hellenistic culture and establish centers of Greek influence throughout his domains, Alexander founded numerous new urban centers. These cities, often named Alexandria, served as focal points for the dissemination of Greek ideas, art, and governance, while also acting as vital hubs for trade and cultural exchange. Alexandria in Egypt would become one of the great intellectual and commercial centers of the ancient world. Recognizing the importance of economic integration, Alexander took steps to standardize currency across the empire. This move aimed to facilitate trade and economic interaction among the diverse regions under his rule. By creating a common medium of exchange, he hoped to foster increased commercial activity and economic interdependence throughout his domains. Alexander's efforts to unify his empire extended to the military sphere as well. He began training 30,000 Persian youths in the Macedonian art of war, aiming to create a new hybrid force that could serve as the backbone of his unified empire. This initiative not only expanded his military capabilities, but also demonstrated his commitment to incorporating conquered peoples into the highest echelons of his administration. The ultimate goal of these varied initiatives was the creation of a unified world empire that would blend the best elements of Eastern and Western cultures. Alexander envisioned a harmonious coexistence among the diverse peoples he had conquered, with Greek and Persian traditions merging to form a new syncretic civilization. This grand vision represented a radical departure from the traditional Greek view of non-Greeks as inherently inferior, instead embracing a more cosmopolitan outlook that recognized the value and contributions of all cultures within the empire. The mysterious death of a conqueror. In 323 BCE, Alexander the Great's triumphant return to Babylon took a devastating turn. The conqueror of the known world, fresh from his campaigns and brimming with plans for future conquests, was suddenly struck down by a mysterious and severe illness. The bustling city, once alive with anticipation of new horizons, fell into an eerie silence as news of Alexander's deteriorating condition spread like wildfire. The onset of the illness was swift and merciless. Within days, the seemingly invincible king was bedridden, his legendary strength rapidly ebbing away. The fever that gripped him defied all attempts at treatment, leaving his physicians baffled and his companions in a state of shock. As Alexander's condition worsened, The atmosphere in Babylon grew increasingly tense, with courtiers, generals, and advisors gathering anxiously outside his chambers. The sudden decline of their leader sent shockwaves through the empire. Those who had witnessed Alexander's meteoric rise and unparalleled military successes now watched helplessly as he battled an unseen foe. The streets of Babylon, once filled with celebration, now echoed with hushed whispers and fervent prayers for the king's recovery. The cause of Alexander's fatal illness has remained a subject of intense debate among historians and medical experts for centuries. Some theories point to natural causes such as malaria, typhoid fever, or cholera, all of which were prevalent in the region. These diseases could have easily afflicted the king, especially considering the physical toll of his constant campaigning and the unsanitary conditions of ancient warfare. Other experts have proposed more sinister explanations. The possibility of poisoning has been seriously considered, given the political intrigue that often surrounded powerful figures in the ancient world. Alexander had made numerous enemies during his conquests, and there were those who might have seen an opportunity to eliminate a formidable adversary. A third school of thought suggests that Alexander's death may have resulted from a combination of factors: the cumulative effects of wounds sustained in battle, the stress of constant campaigning, and his renowned propensity for heavy drinking could have weakened his constitution, making him more susceptible to a fatal illness. As Alexander lay on his deathbed, the future of his vast empire hung in the balance. His closest companions gathered around him, their faces etched with concern and barely concealed ambition. It was during these final moments that Alexander reportedly uttered his famous last words. When asked who should succeed him as ruler of the empire, he allegedly responded with the cryptic phrase, "to the strongest." This ambiguous statement would prove to be a fateful one, setting the stage for years of conflict and power struggles among his generals. The impact of Alexander's impending death on his grand plans was immediate and profound. His vision of further conquest and imperial unification began to crumble even as he drew his final breaths. The carefully laid plans for campaigns into Arabia, North Africa, and the Western Mediterranean were suddenly rendered moot. The dream of a truly unified empire, blending the best of Eastern and Western cultures, seemed to slip away with each labored breath. On June 10th, 323 BCE, Alexander the Great breathed his last. He was just 32 years old. The young king, who had reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the ancient world in just over a decade, had fallen not to an enemy's sword, but to an unseen assailant that no amount of military prowess could overcome. His death marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in ancient history, one that would be shaped by the ambitions and conflicts of those he left behind, legacy of an empire builder. Alexander's life ended abruptly, but his influence on the ancient world was only beginning. The dissolution of his vast empire among his ambitious generals set the stage for a cultural revolution that would transform the known world. This fragmentation, paradoxically, became the catalyst for one of the most significant cultural expansions in ancient history. In the wake of Alexander's death, his empire quickly fractured into several distinct kingdoms ruled by his former generals. The Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, the Seleucid Empire stretching from Syria to Central Asia, and the Antigonid dynasty in Macedonia emerged as the primary inheritors of Alexander's conquests. Despite their political divisions, these Hellenistic kingdoms shared a common cultural heritage rooted in Greek traditions, blended with local customs and practices. This period, known as the Hellenistic Age, saw an unprecedented spread of Greek culture across the territories Alexander had conquered. From Greece to Pakistan, The fusion of Greek and Eastern elements created a vibrant new cultural landscape that would shape the Mediterranean and Near East for centuries to come. Greek became the lingua franca of the educated elite, facilitating the exchange of ideas across vast distances and diverse populations. Alexandria in Egypt stands out as the crowning achievement of Alexander's urban vision. The city's famous Library of Alexandria became the intellectual heart of the Hellenistic world, attracting scholars, scientists, and philosophers from across the known world. Here, advancements in art, science, and philosophy flourished, characterized by a spirit of inquiry and innovation that defined the Hellenistic period. Alexander's legacy extended far beyond the realm of culture. His military innovations, particularly the use of combined arms tactics, revolutionized warfare and influenced military strategies for centuries. The vast network of conquered territories under his brief rule also facilitated unprecedented levels of trade and cultural exchange between East and West. This cross-cultural pollination would have lasting effects on art, architecture, religion, and philosophy throughout the region. In the realm of art and architecture, the Hellenistic period saw a remarkable blending of Greek and Eastern styles. Sculptors began to explore more dramatic, emotional themes, moving away from the idealized forms of classical Greek art. Architecture incorporated elements from various traditions, resulting in grand, eclectic structures that reflected the cosmopolitan nature of the Hellenistic world. However, Alexander's legacy is not without controversy. In the West, he is often celebrated as a visionary unifier, a cultural ambassador who brought Greek civilization to the far corners of the known world. In contrast, some Eastern traditions remember Alexander as a ruthless conqueror, whose campaigns brought destruction and upheaval to long-established civilizations. This dichotomy reflects the complex nature of Alexander's impact and the differing experiences of those who came under his rule. Despite these contrasting views, the profound influence of Alexander's conquests on the course of ancient history is undeniable. The Hellenistic kingdoms that emerged from his empire would shape the political and cultural landscape of the Mediterranean and Near East for centuries. The spread of Greek culture and language facilitated by his conquests would later prove instrumental in the rapid dissemination of Christianity across the Roman Empire. Moreover, the idea of a vast, multicultural empire united under a single ruler, which Alexander had briefly realized, would inspire future conquerors and statesmen. The Roman Empire, in particular, would draw inspiration from Alexander's achievements as it expanded across the Mediterranean world. Alexander the Great's journey from Macedonian prince to creator of one of history's largest empires showcases the power of visionary leadership. His conquests reshaped the ancient world, yet the swift collapse after his death reveals the fragility of empires built on personal charisma and military might. Without clear succession, his generals fought for control, demonstrating that even brilliant victories can be short-lived without robust institutions. The rapid unraveling of Alexander's vast, multicultural empire serves as a striking reminder of the challenges in maintaining such expansive realms. What can we learn from Alexander's legacy about the nature of power and the sustainability of influence in leadership and empire building?